Hi, my name is Yasser S. Marilil, and today we will be discussing about lesson plan. So, what do you think a lesson plan is? Lesson plan is a written work that includes procedures, materials, and statement of objectives that guide and remind the teacher when teaching a lesson. In the context of the teaching and learning, differentiation in the objectives means the provision of content or activities that are appropriate for the grade or level of ability. Lesson topic. The teacher begins to plan each lesson by considering the student's characteristics as well as the learning context. This consideration entails a deep understanding of what he or she is to teach. A content standards, a standards-based curriculum, or guidelines. The teacher should also consider what students should be able to do and what performance will look like when instruction has been completed. Lesson information includes not only the content but also the learning and developmental needs of the students. The teacher must consider the time he or she has to complete the lesson and other resources available, and should decide whether or not the lesson should take one class period or several. Questions to ask include: am I planning the right amount of activities for the time I have? Is the scope of the lesson too ambitious for the time allotted? Will students be able to stay on task, or will they become disengaged because they're spending too much time on one small aspect of work? Success in the lesson depends on how appropriate the focus, time frame, activities, and assessments are for the students. It also depends on the skill with which the teacher is able to match instructional strategies to student learning needs. The lesson should begin with a topic derived from the adopted standards-based curriculum for a school or district. Because it relates to specific information the teacher is trying to impart, the topic should be part of the larger curriculum, required at your grade level. However, the specific topic for the lesson may emerge from student questions or interests from community resources from local expectations included in the content standards, and other topics listed in the standards. Intended learning outcomes. Intended learning outcomes are tied specifically to the standards or benchmarks addressed in the lesson. Clarify intended learning outcomes for both the teacher and the student. Provide a focus for instructional planning. Set the stage for teaching, learning, and assessment. Identify specifically how learning will be evidenced in the lesson plan. State your intended learning outcomes. Clarify the intended learning outcomes for students by writing them on the board or through some other visual format. In your planning, carefully consider the resources that will support student learning during the lesson. These might include textbook or other reading materials, websters, processors, or other specific computer software, movies, CDs, of other media, guest speakers, project supplies, including posters, paper, markers, or tape. A good daily lesson plan will include at least the following. Introduction. The beginning of the lesson should engage the student's attention and focus on the topic. Remember, activities should be based on the standards-based curriculum. Activities might include a challenging question, a quick survey of attitudes or beliefs about the topic. Lesson development. Teachers should make students aware of the intended learning outcomes of the lesson. Your description of each activity should include a discussion of what you will do as the teacher and what the students will do as well. It is important for students to employ higher-order thinking skills so they may apply and synthesize new content. Explain what modifications will be made for special needs students. Remember that the time frame you have established for this lesson. How long will each activity take to complete? How many activities can students realistically engage in during the time allotted? Assessment activities. During the lesson, you should monitor student learning. Describe specifically and in measurable terms how you will determine whether students have met the intended learning outcomes. For example, your description of the assessment process might include statements such as the following. All students will actively participate in each activity. All students will complete a timeline that includes the important events discussed during the lesson. All students will write a statement at the end of the class about what they learned during the lesson. Wrap up. End class with a restatement of the intended learning outcomes. Decide on a way to close the activities. Will students reflect on what they have learned? Will they turn in their work or complete it as homework? Have you clearly defined expectations for their homework assignment? Does the homework assignment extend or complete the intended learning outcome? Teacher reflection. When you have actually taught each lesson, write a reflection on what occurred during the process. Did students meet the intended learning outcomes of the lesson? Why or why not? Consider your part in their success. Was the time frame appropriate? Were your directions clear? Did the activities you planned actually support the intended learning outcomes, or were they somehow off track? Were activities adequately modified for special needs learners in your class? What activities would you do again? What would you do differently next time? And that is all for today's video. Thank you for watching.